I never thought a single envelope could change everything. But there I was, sitting in my grandmother's dusty attic in Salem, Oregon, holding a letter that would turn my entire world upside down. My name is Jake, and this is the story of how I discovered that sometimes the people who believe in us the most are the ones we least expect. It was a rainy Tuesday in October when my mom called me with the news. "Jake, honey, Grandma Rose passed away peacefully in her sleep." The words hit me like a freight train. I was 22, fresh out of college with a degree in communications that felt more worthless by the day, living in a cramped studio apartment in Portland, working at a coffee shop called Been There, Done That. Yeah, I know. The irony wasn't lost on me either. Grandma Rose had been my anchor growing up. While my parents were busy with their demanding careers, Dad as a software engineer at Nike headquarters in Beaverton, Mom as a nurse at OHSU, Grandma Rose was the one who picked me up from school, helped with homework, and listened to my dreams without judgment. She lived in this charming Victorian house on Cherry Street, with its creaky wooden floors and the smell of lavender sachets that seemed to permeate every room. The funeral was small, intimate. Family and a few neighbors gathered at Bellcrest Memorial Park under a canopy of Douglas fir trees, their branches heavy with Pacific Northwest mist. I stood there in my only decent suit, a hand-me-down from my dad that was slightly too big, watching as they lowered the woman who had believed in me more than I believed in myself into the ground. After the service, Mom pulled me aside. "Jake, Grandma Rose left specific instructions. She wanted you to clean out her attic, said there were things up there that belonged to you." I nodded, not really processing what that meant. I was still numb from the loss. 2 days later, I found myself climbing the narrow wooden stairs to Grandma Rose's attic, dust motes dancing in the afternoon light filtering through a small circular window. The space was cramped but organized, vintage suitcases stacked neatly, old photo albums, and boxes labeled in Grandma's precise handwriting, Christmas decorations, Rose's teaching materials, Harold's war letters. That was my grandfather who died when I was 10. I spent hours up there, sorting through decades of memories. There were my old report cards. Grandma had kept every single one. My little league participation trophies, the ones I was embarrassed about because I was terrible at baseball. And photographs of family gatherings I'd forgotten about. Each item felt like a small piece of my childhood being returned to me. It was getting dark outside when I found it. Tucked away in a small wooden box that smelled of cedar and thyme was an envelope with my name written on it in Grandma's familiar cursive. "For Jake, to be opened when you need to remember who you are." My hands trembled as I opened it. The paper inside was cream-colored, expensive-looking, and filled with Grandma's careful handwriting. As I began to read, tears started flowing down my cheeks. "My dearest Jake, if you're reading this, then I've gone on to whatever comes after this beautiful life, and you're probably feeling lost. I know you, my sweet boy. You've always been too hard on yourself, too quick to believe the harsh words of others rather than the loving truth I've tried to show you all these years. You came to me last month, though by the time you read this, it might be last year or longer, after that job interview at the marketing firm. You were so defeated, convinced that the interviewer was right when he said you lacked the spark for their company. You sat in my kitchen, stirring sugar into your coffee long after it had dissolved, and said, 'Grandma, maybe I just don't matter. Maybe I'm not meant for anything special.' Oh, Jake, if only you could see yourself the way I see you." I had to stop reading. The memory came flooding back, that horrible interview at Peterson and Associates downtown. The interviewer, a man in his 50s with cold eyes and an expensive suit, had looked at my resume for all of 30 seconds before dismissing me. "You don't have the experience we're looking for," he'd said. "And frankly, you don't seem to have the spark, the drive that we need in this competitive market." I'd left that office feeling like I was 2 inches tall. I'd driven straight to Grandma's house, where she'd made me coffee and listened to me vent. But I hadn't realized how much my words about not mattering had affected her. The letter continued. "I need you to know something, Jake. You changed my life the day you were born. Your mother was so young, barely 21, and your father was working those impossible hours trying to establish his career. They were overwhelmed, exhausted, and scared. I watched them struggle during your first year, and I worried they might not make it as a family. But then you started walking early, 9 months old, and already exploring every corner of their apartment. You had this laugh, this pure joy that filled whatever room you were in. I'll never forget the day your dad came home from work, stressed about a project deadline, and you toddled over to him with that gap-toothed grin and handed him your favorite toy car. The way his face changed, Jake. The way you melted all that stress away just by being you. That's when I knew you had something special. This was news to me. My parents had never told me about struggling in their early years. To my knowledge, they'd always been the picture of stability and success. Over the years, I watched you touch people's lives in ways you never even noticed. Do you remember Mrs. Henderson, our elderly neighbor with the overgrown garden? You were maybe 8 years old when you started helping her pull weeds without being asked. You'd spend hours over there, listening to her stories about her late husband, helping her plant new flowers. She told me once that you were the only person who made her feel less lonely after Harold died. You gave her a reason to tend her garden again. And what about Marcus, that shy kid in your middle school who got picked on? You didn't just defend him, you became his friend. You invited him to birthday parties, included him in your group projects, made him feel like he belonged. His mother called me once to thank our family for raising such a kind son. She said Marcus finally looked forward to going to school because he knew you'd be there. These aren't small things, Jake. These are the moments that define a person's character, and you've been showing exceptional character since you were a child. I remembered Mrs. Henderson vividly. She'd moved away when I was in high school, but I'd loved spending time in her garden. It never occurred to me that I was helping her with loneliness. I just enjoyed her stories and the way she taught me about different flowers and vegetables. And Marcus Chen, I hadn't thought about him in years. He'd been this quiet, brilliant kid who got teased for being different. I'd never considered myself his protector. I just thought he was interesting to talk to. He knew everything about astronomy and could explain complex math concepts in ways that actually made sense. The letter went on to detail memory after memory. Times when I'd helped classmates with homework, when I'd volunteered at the local food bank during high school, when I'd stayed late at my part-time job at the community center to help an elderly man figure out how to use email to communicate with his grandchildren. You see, my dear Jake, you've never needed to do anything extraordinary to matter. You matter because of who you are. Someone who notices when others are struggling, who offers help without expecting anything in return, who brings light to dark moments just by being present and caring. The world is full of people who will try to convince you that you're not enough, that you need to be louder, more aggressive, more willing to step on others to get ahead. They will measure your worth by your salary, your job title, or your social media following. Don't let them define you. I have lived for 87 years, and I have learned that the people who matter most are rarely the ones making the most noise. They're the ones like you, the helpers, the listeners, the ones who make others feel seen and valued. By this point, I was crying so hard I could barely see the words on the page. The attic felt smaller, more intimate, like Grandma Rose was sitting right there with me. Now, I know you're probably wondering why I'm telling you all this in a letter instead of saying it to your face. The truth is, I tried many times, but you young people today, you're so busy, so distracted, so convinced that you need to figure everything out right now. I could see you weren't ready to hear it yet. You needed to feel lost before you could appreciate being found. There's something else I need to tell you, Jake, something I've never shared with anyone in our family. The letter took an unexpected turn here, and I found myself leaning closer to the paper as if Grandma might whisper the next part. When I was your age, I felt exactly the way you feel now. It was 1956, and I had just graduated from Oregon State with a teaching degree. I applied to 17 different schools in Oregon and Washington, and 16 of them rejected me. The interviews were brutal. Male principals would look at me, a young woman who wanted to teach high school English, and essentially tell me I should find a nice young man to marry instead. The 17th school was Lincoln High School in Salem. The principal, Mr. Garrett, was different. He was older, maybe in his 60s, and he had kind eyes. After our interview, he said something I'll never forget. "Miss Thompson, I can see that you care deeply about young people and literature. That matters more than any fancy credentials or years of experience. The question is, do you believe in yourself enough to prove the other 16 schools wrong?" I got the job, Jake, and over the next 35 years, I taught thousands of students. I helped kids who thought they weren't smart enough discover they were brilliant. I watched shy students find their voices through writing. I saw troubled teenagers turn their lives around because someone finally believed in them. But here's the thing. None of that would have happened if I had listened to those 16 principals who said I wasn't right for the job. If I had accepted their assessment of my worth, I would have missed out on the most fulfilling career imaginable, and thousands of young people would have missed out on having a teacher who truly saw them. Mr. Garrett taught me something that day that I'm now passing on to you. Other people's opinions of you are not facts. They're just opinions, often shaped by their own limitations, biases, and fears. This revelation about Grandma's early career struggles hit me like a lightning bolt. She'd always seemed so confident, so sure of her place in the world. To know that she'd faced rejection and doubt just like I was facing now made her wisdom feel even more powerful. So here's what I want you to do, my dear boy. I want you to start keeping a journal, not of your failures or rejections, but of the moments when you make a difference. Write down every time someone smiles because of something you said. Note when a coworker asks for your advice. Pay attention to the times when your presence changes the energy in a room for the better. You'll be surprised how often these moments happen. You've been so focused on the people who don't see your value that you've stopped noticing the ones who do. And Jake, that marketing firm that rejected you, I have a feeling they don't deserve someone with your heart anyway. The right opportunity will come, but only if you start believing you're worthy of it. The letter was nearly over, but Grandma had saved the most important part for last. There's one more thing in this box, a small gift I've been saving for you. It belonged to your great-grandfather Thomas, my father. He was a quiet man, much like you, who spent his life as a carpenter here in Salem. People didn't think much of him because he wasn't flashy or wealthy, but he built half the houses in our neighborhood, including the one you're sitting in right now. Before he died, he told me something I want to share with you. Rose, I may not be famous, and I may not be rich, but every house I've built has sheltered a family. Every bookshelf I've crafted has held someone's most treasured stories. Every rocking chair I've made has comforted a mother with her baby. That's how you measure a life, not by how much noise you make, but by how much good you leave behind. You are already leaving good behind, Jake. You just need to start noticing it. I love you more than words can express. You have always mattered to me, and you always will. Your devoted grandmother, Rose. I sat in that dusty attic for a long time after finishing the letter, letting Grandma's words sink in. The rain had stopped, and the first stars were becoming visible through the small window. I looked in the box and found what she'd mentioned, a small, worn leather journal with TR embossed on the cover in faded gold letters. Thomas Robertson, my great-grandfather. Inside the front cover, in his careful handwriting, was a short note. For recording the good we do and the lives we touch, every small act of kindness matters. As I climbed down from the attic that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not the desperate, grasping kind of hope that comes from wanting something to change, but the quiet, steady hope that comes from understanding that maybe I was already enough, just as I was. I drove home to Portland in a daze, Grandma's letter and great-grandfather's journal on the passenger seat beside me. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement as I made my way through downtown, past Pioneer Courthouse Square and up into the hills where my studio apartment waited. That night, I made my first entry in the journal. October 15th. Today I discovered that my grandmother saw something in me that I've never been able to see in myself. Tomorrow, I'm going to start looking for it too. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of purpose. It wasn't the manic energy that comes from desperation or caffeine. It was something steadier, more grounded. I looked at great-grandfather's journal on my nightstand and remembered Grandma's challenge. Start noticing the moments when I make a difference. My shift at Been There, Done That started at 7 a.m., which meant I had to be there by 6:45 to help with opening prep. The coffee shop was located in the Pearl District, a trendy area filled with art galleries, lofts, and young professionals who needed their caffeine fix before facing the day. I'd been working there for 8 months, and it had become routine. Show up, make coffee, smile at customers, clean up, go home, repeat. But that morning felt different. As I unlocked the front door and flipped on the lights, I found myself really looking at the space for the first time in weeks. The exposed brick walls were decorated with local artwork that rotated monthly. The mismatched vintage furniture gave the place a cozy, lived-in feel. The smell of freshly ground coffee beans mixed with the faint scent of the bakery next door. My co-worker Sarah arrived a few minutes later, looking harried as usual. Sarah was a single mom in her 30s, studying nursing at Portland Community College while working 2 jobs to support her 8-year-old daughter, Emma. She always seemed to be running on 3 hours of sleep and pure determination. "Morning, Jake," she said, tying her apron around her waist. "Thanks for getting the machine started." "No problem," I replied, and then something made me really look at her face. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her usually cheerful demeanor seemed forced. "Hey, are you okay? You seem stressed." Sarah paused in her routine, coffee scoop halfway to the espresso machine. "It's nothing major. Emma's been having trouble in school. Some kids have been picking on her about her clothes and stuff. You know how cruel kids can be. She doesn't want to go anymore, and I'm trying to figure out how to help her without making it worse." In the old version of myself, the version from 2 days ago, I would have made a sympathetic noise and changed the subject. But Grandma's letter had created a crack in my usual self-absorption, and suddenly I found myself really caring about Sarah's problem. "That's terrible," I said. "Kids can be so mean. What kind of stuff are they saying?" Sarah looked surprised that I was asking follow-up questions. Usually our conversation stayed pretty surface level. "Oh, you know, typical stuff. Her clothes aren't brand names. Her backpack is from a thrift store. That kind of thing. I do my best, but nursing school and 2 jobs, there's not a lot left over for the fancy stuff other kids have." An idea started forming in my mind. "Sarah, what size is Emma?" "She's 8, but she's tall for her age. Probably a size 10 in kids' clothes." "Why?" I thought about my own childhood, about the boxes of clothes in Grandma's attic. My grandmother just passed away, and we're cleaning out her house. She was a teacher for 35 years, and she had this whole collection of nice clothes that people donated for students who needed them. Some of it is barely worn. "Would it be weird if I brought some stuff for Emma to look through?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I panicked, thinking I'd offended her. But then she smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in weeks. "Jake, that would be amazing. Are you sure? I mean, I don't want charity, but..." "It's not charity," I said quickly. "It's just clothes that need a good home. And honestly, it would help me out too. There's so much stuff to go through at Grandma's house." That afternoon, after my shift ended, I drove back to Salem. The house felt different in daylight, less melancholy, more like a treasure trove waiting to be explored. I climbed back up to the attic and found what I was looking for. 3 large boxes labeled School Clothing Drive. Grandma had apparently been collecting gently used children's clothes for years, probably for students at her school who needed them. The boxes were full of beautiful items: sweaters, jeans, dresses, coats, many with tags still attached. I selected about 20 items that looked like they'd fit Emma and carefully folded them into a bag. As I was getting ready to leave, my phone rang. It was my mom. "Hi, honey. How are you holding up? I know cleaning out Grandma's house can't be easy." "Actually, Mom, I'm doing okay. Better than okay, really. I found something yesterday that, well, it's changed my perspective on some things." I told her about the letter, about Grandma's struggles when she was young, about the journal. Mom listened quietly, and when I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "Jake," she finally said, "I need to tell you something. Your grandmother called me about 3 weeks ago, right after you had that awful job interview. She was worried about you, said you seemed to be losing faith in yourself. She asked me if she should say something to you directly, or if it would be better coming from us." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that sometimes the most important messages need to come from the right person at the right time. I think she knew you'd need to hear this from her after she was gone, when you were ready to really listen." The idea that Grandma had planned this, that she'd written the letter specifically because she could see I was struggling, made her gift feel even more precious. "Mom, can I ask you something? Did you and Dad really struggle when I was a baby?" Another long pause. "Oh, Jake, yes we did. We were so young and so scared we were going to mess up this perfect little person we'd been given. Your dad was working 70-hour weeks. I was trying to finish nursing school, and we barely had enough money to cover rent and groceries. There were nights when we'd both be crying right along with you because we didn't know what we were doing. Grandma never told me that. She didn't want to burden you with our problems. But Jake, what she wrote in that letter is absolutely true. You saved us, not in some dramatic movie of the week way, but in all the small daily ways that matter. You gave us a reason to keep going when everything felt impossible." After we hung up, I sat in Grandma's kitchen for a while, processing this new information about my family's history. It was strange to think that I'd been helping people from the very beginning of my life without even knowing it. The next morning at work, I brought the bag of clothes for Emma. Sarah's face lit up when she saw it. "Jake, this is incredible. Look at this sweater. It still has tags on it. And these jeans are from that expensive kids' store at the mall. Emma is going to feel like a princess. I'm just glad they'll get some use," I said, feeling a warm glow in my chest that I was starting to recognize as the feeling of making a difference. But the real magic happened later that week when Sarah brought Emma by the coffee shop after school. Emma was wearing one of the outfits I'd brought, a purple sweater with a unicorn on it and a pair of dark wash jeans that looked like they'd been made for her. "Emma, this is Jake," Sarah said. "He's the one who found those clothes for you." Emma looked up at me with serious brown eyes. "Thank you for the clothes," she said politely. "They're really pretty." "You're welcome," I replied. "You look great in purple." Emma beamed. "It's my favorite color." "Mom says you found these in your grandma's attic?" "That's right. My grandma was a teacher, and she collected nice clothes for students who needed them." "Your grandma sounds like she was really nice." "She was," I said, feeling that familiar tightness in my throat. "She would have loved knowing that you're wearing them." As they were leaving, Emma turned back to me. "Jake, the kids at school said my new clothes are really cool. Nobody was mean to me today." That night, I made my second entry in great-grandfather's journal. October 20th, helped Sarah's daughter Emma with clothes from Grandma's collection. Saw Emma smile for the first time. Sarah looked happier than she has in weeks. Sometimes helping others is as simple as sharing what we have. The following week, I started paying more attention to the customers at the coffee shop. There was Mr. Peterson, an elderly man who came in every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 10:15 a.m., always ordering a small black coffee and a blueberry muffin. He'd sit in the corner booth by the window, reading a paperback novel and occasionally chuckling to himself. One Thursday, Mr. Peterson seemed different. He ordered his usual, but his hands were shaking slightly, and he dropped his change on the counter. As he bent to pick it up, I noticed his eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been crying. "Mr. Peterson, are you all right?" I asked, as I handed him his coffee. He looked surprised that I'd noticed. "Oh, I'm fine, son. Just having a rough day." Something in his voice made me press a little. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Mr. Peterson studied my face for a moment, as if deciding whether to trust me. "It's my wife, Margaret. Today would have been our 50th wedding anniversary. She passed away 2 years ago, and the anniversaries, well, they're the hardest days." My heart broke for him. "I'm so sorry for your loss. 50 years, that's incredible. You must have loved her very much, more than life itself," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We used to come here together, you know. This was our special place. She always got a latte with extra foam, said it made her feel fancy." An idea struck me. "Mr. Peterson, would you mind if I made you a latte with extra foam? On the house. You could drink it for Margaret." The old man's eyes filled with tears. "Son, that might be the kindest thing anyone's done for me in 2 years." I made the latte carefully, creating extra foam just the way Margaret would have liked it. When I brought it to his table, Mr. Peterson raised the cup slightly, as if in a toast. "To Margaret," he said quietly. "To Margaret," I echoed. Mr. Peterson stayed longer than usual that day, and when he left, he stopped by the counter. "Thank you, Jake. You helped me feel like she was here with me today." That evening's journal entry read, October 25th, made a special latte for Mr. Peterson in memory of his wife, Margaret. Sometimes the smallest gestures can help someone carry their grief a little easier. Grandma was right. I am starting to notice these moments. The weeks that followed were like waking up from a long sleep. I began to see opportunities to help and connect everywhere. Helping a young mother carry her stroller up the steps to the coffee shop, listening to a stressed college student vent about her upcoming exams, giving directions to lost tourists trying to find Powell's books. Each small interaction felt significant now. I was building a collection of moments that proved Grandma's point. I did matter, and I had been mattering all along. But the real test came 3 weeks after I'd found the letter. I was working the morning shift when a well-dressed woman in her 40s walked in, looking around nervously. She approached the counter hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm looking for someone named Jake, the young man with dark hair who works here." "That's me," I said, wondering if I'd somehow messed up someone's order. "My name is Linda Chen. I think you went to school with my son Marcus?" My heart skipped a beat. Marcus Chen, the shy kid from middle school that Grandma had mentioned in her letter. Yes, I remember Marcus. How is he? Linda's face broke into a huge smile. He's wonderful. He's finishing his PhD in astrophysics at Stanford. But that's not why I'm here. She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. Marcus is getting married next month, and he's been trying to track down some of his old friends to invite them to the wedding. When he found out you worked here, he asked me to stop by and give you this. She handed me an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a wedding invitation and a handwritten note. Jake, I don't know if you remember me, but you probably saved my life in 7th grade. I was going through a really dark time, getting bullied every day, feeling like I didn't belong anywhere. Then you started sitting with me at lunch, including me in your group projects, treating me like I mattered. You never made a big deal about it, but it changed everything for me. I found the confidence to pursue my dreams because someone I respected believed I was worth being friends with. I'd love for you to be at my wedding, if you can make it. Marcus. I stared at the note, remembering that quiet kid who knew everything about stars and planets. I'd never thought of our friendship as life-saving. I just enjoyed talking to someone who could explain why the sky was blue and how far away the nearest galaxy was. This is amazing, I told Linda. I had no idea our friendship meant so much to him. Jake, Linda said, her voice serious. Marcus talks about you all the time. He says you were the first person who ever made him feel like being smart and different was okay. He credits you with giving him the confidence to pursue science, to believe he could succeed in academia despite being shy and introverted. As Linda left, I felt that familiar warmth spreading through my chest. I pulled out my journal and wrote, November 10th, Marcus Chen's mother came to invite me to his wedding. Apparently, being his friend in middle school gave him confidence to pursue his dreams. He's now getting a PhD in astrophysics. I never knew that just being kind to someone could have such a lasting impact. That night, I called my parents and told them about Marcus, about Mr. Peterson, about Emma and Sarah, about all the small moments that were adding up to something bigger. Jake, my dad said, you sound different, happier. I feel different, Dad. It's like I've been looking at my life through the wrong lens. I kept focusing on the people who didn't see my value instead of the ones who did. That's very wise, son. And very much like something your grandmother would say. As I hung up the phone, I realized that Grandma's letter hadn't just given me a new perspective on my past, it had given me a roadmap for my future. I was starting to understand that my worth wasn't determined by job titles or salary figures or the approval of strangers in suits. It was determined by the connections I made, the help I offered, the kindness I shared. But I also knew that this was just the beginning. Reading Grandma's letter and recognizing my impact was one thing. Figuring out how to build a life and career around these strengths was another challenge entirely. By December, I had filled nearly half of great-grandfather's journal with entries about moments when I'd made a difference. The pattern was becoming clear. I had a natural ability to notice when people were struggling and an instinct to help in practical, meaningful ways. But I was still working at a coffee shop, still living in a studio apartment, still unsure how to translate these realizations into a sustainable future. The turning point came on a gray Wednesday morning when my manager, Dave, asked me to stay after my shift to talk. Dave was in his late 20s, a Portland native with sleeve tattoos and a business degree from Portland State. He'd opened Been There, Done That 3 years ago with money he'd saved from working at Nike, and he'd always been a good boss, fair, understanding, and genuinely interested in his employees' well-being. Jake, sit down, he said, gesturing to one of the chairs near the window. I've been watching you these past few months, and I've noticed some changes. My stomach dropped. Was I about to get fired? Had I been too focused on helping customers and not focused enough on efficiency? Changes? I asked nervously. Dave smiled. Good changes. You've always been reliable and hardworking. But lately, you've been, I don't know how to describe it, more present, more engaged. Customers have been mentioning you by name in their online reviews. He pulled out his phone and started reading. The young man with dark hair who works mornings is so kind and attentive. He remembered my order after just 2 visits and always asks about my day like he genuinely cares. And this one, Jake made my daughter feel so special when we came in last week. He took time to show her how the espresso machine works and gave her a free cookie. Excellent customer service. And my personal favorite, I've been having a really tough time lately, and Jake always seems to know just what to say to brighten my day. This coffee shop is lucky to have him. I was speechless. I'd been so focused on the individual moments that I hadn't realized people were noticing a pattern. Jake, Dave continued, I'm opening a second location in the Alberta district next year, and I need someone to manage it. Someone who understands that a coffee shop is more than just a place to sell drinks. It's a community space where people come to feel connected and cared for. I think you might be that person. You want me to manage the new location? I could barely believe what I was hearing. I want you to help me design it, hire the staff, create the culture. You'd have full creative control over how we serve customers, what kind of environment we create. And of course, there'd be a significant pay raise and benefits. I felt like I was in a dream. 3 months ago, I was convinced I was a failure with no prospects. Now I was being offered a management position based on qualities I'd never even known I possessed. Dave, I don't know what to say. I don't have management experience. Jake, you can't teach someone to care about people the way you do. That's not a skill you learn in business school. It's just who you are. The rest we can figure out together. That night, I called my parents to share the news. Mom cried happy tears, and Dad kept saying how proud he was. But the person I most wanted to tell was Grandma Rose, and she wasn't there to hear it. Instead, I drove out to Salem and sat in her kitchen, telling the empty room about Dave's offer, about the journal entries, about how her letter had changed everything. I wish you were here to see this, Grandma, I said aloud, feeling a little silly but needing to say it anyway. I think you'd be proud. A few days later, I was back in the attic, looking for more items to donate, when I found another box I'd missed before. This one was labeled Jake's Things in Grandma's handwriting. Inside were more treasures from my childhood, but also some things I didn't recognize. Newspaper clippings, printed emails, and photographs. The newspaper clippings were from my high school years. An article about the food bank where I'd volunteered, with a photo of me helping to sort donations. Another about the community center's tutoring program, where I'd helped elementary school kids with their homework. I was mentioned by name in both articles, described as a dedicated young volunteer and someone who makes learning fun for struggling students. The printed emails were even more surprising. They were thank you notes that parents had sent to the community center director, talking about how much their children had improved after working with me. One mother wrote, Jake has such patience with my son Tommy, who has ADHD and struggles to focus. For the first time in years, Tommy is excited about math homework. Jake makes him feel smart and capable. Another email from a father whose daughter I'd tutored in English. Sarah's grades have improved dramatically since she started working with Jake, but more importantly, her confidence has soared. She told me yesterday that she wants to be a writer when she grows up. Thank you for connecting us with such a wonderful mentor. At the bottom of the box were photos I'd never seen before. Pictures Grandma had apparently taken without my knowledge during family gatherings. There was one of me at age 16, sitting on the floor with my little cousin Lily, patiently teaching her how to tie her shoes. Another showed me at 18, helping my elderly Uncle Harold set up his new smartphone at a family barbecue, both of us laughing at something on the screen. But the photo that took my breath away was from just 2 years ago, Thanksgiving dinner at Grandma's house. While the adults were in the living room watching football, I was in the kitchen with Grandma, helping her wash dishes and put away leftovers. She had captured a moment where I was listening intently as she told me a story, my full attention focused on her words. On the back, in her careful handwriting, she'd written, Jake always makes time to listen. This is his superpower. Under the photos was one final letter, shorter than the first, but just as powerful. My dear Jake, if you're reading this, then you found your second box of treasures. I hope by now you're starting to see what I've always seen, that you have a gift for making people feel valued and heard. I've been collecting these clippings and emails for years, not to prove anything to you, but to prove something to myself. You see, as a teacher, I always wondered if I was doing enough to help my students recognize their own potential. Watching you grow up became my greatest success story, not because you achieved anything flashy or dramatic, but because you became exactly the kind of person the world needs more of. You asked me once why I never married again after your grandfather died. The truth is, I found my purpose in other ways, in my students, in my family, and especially in watching you become the man you were meant to be. Now, I need you to take that gift and share it with the world in whatever way feels right to you. Don't worry about impressing people or meeting other people's expectations. Just focus on being the person you already are, but with intention and confidence. The world is full of people who need exactly what you have to offer. Someone who sees them, hears them, and believes in them. Trust yourself and trust the path that opens up before you. All my love, Grandma Rose P.S. Check the bottom of this box. There's one more surprise. I reached into the box and found a small wrapped package. Inside was a vintage compass, brass and beautifully crafted, with an inscription on the back. To Thomas, for always knowing which direction leads home. Love, Eleanor. It was from my great-grandmother to my great-grandfather. Along with the compass was a note from Grandma. This belonged to your great-grandfather Thomas. He carried it with him every day, not because he was lost, but because he knew that having a sense of direction was about more than knowing where you're going. It's about knowing where you belong. You belong wherever people need kindness, Jake. Let this help you find your way. I sat in that attic for hours, overwhelmed by the depth of Grandma's planning and love. She hadn't just left me a letter, she'd left me a roadmap for understanding my own life and potential. The next few weeks passed in a blur of planning and preparation. Dave and I spent hours designing the new coffee shop location, and I found myself naturally gravitating toward ideas that would make the space more welcoming and community-focused. We planned a larger seating area with comfortable chairs and good lighting for people who wanted to work or study. We designed a kids' corner with books and small tables where parents could bring their children. We even included a bulletin board where community members could post about local events, job opportunities, or items for sale. Jake, Dave said one afternoon as we reviewed the architectural plans, these ideas are brilliant. You're thinking about this place as more than a business. You're creating a community hub. That's what the best coffee shops are, I replied, places where people feel like they belong. As the opening date for the new location approached, I realized I needed to hire and train staff who shared this vision. The interview process became an opportunity to put Grandma's lessons into practice. Instead of just asking about experience and availability, I found myself asking questions like, tell me about a time when you went out of your way to help someone, and what does good customer service mean to you? One applicant, a young woman named Maria, told me about how she'd spent her lunch breaks in high school tutoring classmates who were struggling with English because it was their second language. Another candidate, an older gentleman named Robert, shared how he'd volunteered at a homeless shelter for 15 years, serving meals and just talking with people who needed someone to listen. These were the people I wanted on my team. Not necessarily the ones with the most barista experience, but the ones who understood that serving coffee was really about serving people. The grand opening of the new location, which we'd named Common Ground Coffee, was scheduled for the first week of February. In the days leading up to it, I found myself both excited and nervous. This was my first real test as a manager, my first chance to see if I could create the kind of environment I'd envisioned. The night before we opened, I stayed late to make sure everything was perfect. As I was adjusting the community bulletin board for the third time, Dave found me there. Jake, you need to go home and get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. I know, I just want everything to be right. What if people don't respond the way we hope? What if I'm not ready for this? Dave sat down in one of the chairs near the window. Can I tell you something? When I opened the first location 3 years ago, I was terrified. I'd invested everything I had in this idea, and I had no guarantee it would work. But you know what got me through? What? Remembering why I was doing it in the first place. I wasn't trying to become rich or famous. I just wanted to create a place where people could start their day feeling a little bit better about the world. And you know what? Most days, we succeed at that. He stood up and headed toward the door. Jake, you're not trying to revolutionize the coffee industry tomorrow. You're just trying to make people feel welcome and cared for. And based on everything I've seen from you over the past few months, you're going to be great at that. That night, I made an entry in great-grandfather's journal. February 5th, tomorrow we open Common Ground Coffee. I'm nervous but excited. Grandma always said that the most important moments in life happen when we stop trying to be someone else and start being fully ourselves. Tomorrow, I get to find out what that looks like in practice. Opening day was everything I'd hoped for and more. We had a steady stream of customers from the moment we opened at 6 a.m. Maria turned out to be a natural at making conversation with customers while preparing their drinks. Robert had an amazing ability to remember people's orders and personal details, making everyone feel like a regular even on their first visit. But the moment that made everything worthwhile came around 10 a.m. when an elderly woman came in looking lost and overwhelmed. She approached the counter hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said to Maria. "I'm not really sure what to order. I don't know much about coffee drinks, and everything sounds so complicated." Before I could intervene, Maria smiled warmly. "What do you usually drink at home?" "Just regular coffee with milk and a little sugar." "Then let me make you our house blend with steamed milk and a touch of vanilla. It's like a hug in a cup, and if you don't love it, I'll make you something else." The woman's face relaxed immediately. "That sounds perfect, dear." As Maria prepared the drink, she kept up a gentle conversation, asking about the woman's day and sharing a funny story about learning to use the espresso machine. When she handed over the coffee, the woman took a sip and her face lit up. "Oh, this is wonderful! Much better than I expected." "I'm so glad," Maria said. "And next time you come in, just ask for Margaret's usual and we'll know exactly what you want." The woman, Margaret, looked surprised and delighted that her drink now had a name. She found a seat near the window and spent the next hour reading a book and watching the neighborhood wake up. When she left, she stopped by the counter. "Thank you for making me feel so welcome. I live just around the corner, and I think I've found my new favorite place." As the door closed behind her, I felt that familiar warmth in my chest. This was what Grandma had been talking about, the power of making people feel seen and valued. That evening, after we'd closed and cleaned up, I gathered my small team together. "I want to thank you all for an amazing first day," I said. "You made every customer feel like they mattered, and that's exactly what this place is supposed to be about." Robert raised his hand. "Jake, can I say something? I've worked a lot of different jobs over the years, and this is the first place where I felt like caring about people was actually part of the job description. Thank you for that." As I drove home that night, I called my parents to tell them about the successful opening. Then I drove out to Salem, to Grandma's house, which was now officially on the market. I sat in her kitchen one more time and told her about Margaret, about Maria's kindness, about Robert's gratitude. I told her about the bulletin board where people were already posting community events, about the kids' corner where a mother had spent the afternoon reading to her toddler, about the teenager who'd spent 3 hours studying for a test because she said our space helped her concentrate. "I think I'm finally understanding what you meant, Grandma," I said to the empty room. "It's not about being perfect or extraordinary. It's about being present and caring and trusting that those small actions add up to something meaningful." That night's journal entry was simple, but profound. February 6th, opened Common Ground Coffee today. Watched my team make dozens of people feel welcome and valued. Grandma was right. When you focus on helping others feel better about their day, everything else falls into place. As I closed the journal, I realized that I was no longer the lost, insecure young man who had sat in this attic 3 months ago, convinced that he didn't matter. I was becoming someone who understood his own worth, not because I'd achieved something impressive, but because I'd learned to see the impact I was already having on the world around me. But I also knew that this was just the beginning. The coffee shop was running smoothly, but I could feel myself being called towards something bigger. I wasn't sure what that looked like yet, but I trusted that the path would reveal itself when I was ready to see it. 6 months after opening Common Ground Coffee, something unexpected happened. What started as a neighborhood coffee shop had become something much larger, a genuine community hub where people came not just for caffeine, but for connection. The Kids Corner had evolved into an informal after-school tutoring program, with high school students helping elementary kids with homework while their parents grabbed coffee. The community bulletin board was so popular that we'd had to expand it to cover an entire wall. Local artists were displaying their work on our walls, musicians were asking if they could play during our Friday evening hours, and neighborhood groups were holding informal meetings at our larger tables. But the most surprising development was the number of people who sought me out specifically, not for coffee advice, but for life advice. It started with James, a recent college graduate who'd been coming in every morning for a month, looking increasingly dejected with each visit. One Tuesday, he was sitting alone at his usual table, staring at his laptop screen with obvious frustration. "Rough morning?" I asked, refilling his coffee cup. James looked up with tired eyes. "Rough month, actually." I graduated with a computer science degree, but I can't seem to land a job anywhere. I've sent out maybe 50 applications and gotten 3 interviews, all rejections. I'm starting to think there's something fundamentally wrong with me. The words hit close to home. Mind if I sit down for a minute? James gestured to the empty chair across from him. Sure, but I don't want to dump my problems on you. Trust me, I know exactly how you're feeling. I told him about my own job search struggles, about the brutal interview at Peterson and Associates, about feeling like I was worthless and had nothing to offer. But you're successful now, James said, gesturing around the coffee shop. You're managing this place, and it's obviously thriving. It took me a while to realize that success doesn't look the same for everyone, I replied. Maybe the places that are rejecting you aren't the right fit anyway. What kind of work actually interests you? James lit up for the first time since I'd known him. I love building apps that solve real problems for people. In college, I created this program that helped students find study groups based on their schedules and learning styles. It wasn't anything fancy, but people really used it. That sounds like exactly the kind of innovation businesses need. Have you thought about reaching out to smaller companies, startups, nonprofits, places that might value creativity over credentials? We talked for another 20 minutes about his interests, his skills, and his goals. Before he left, I gave him the contact information for Dave's friend who ran a tech startup focused on educational software. Thanks, Jake, James said as he gathered his things. I feel more hopeful than I have in weeks. 2 weeks later, James came in with a huge grin on his face. I got the job. The startup loved my study group app idea so much that they hired me specifically to develop it into a commercial product. I start Monday. Word spread quickly through our customer base that I was someone who would listen and offer genuine advice. Soon, I was having conversations with people about career changes, relationship problems, family conflicts, and life transitions. I wasn't trying to be a counselor or life coach. I was just being myself, listening carefully, and offering the same kind of practical, caring support that Grandma Rose had given me throughout my life. One afternoon, Dave pulled me aside. Jake, I've been watching what's happening here, and it's incredible. You've created something special. This place has become like a neighborhood living room where people come to figure out their lives. I never intended for that to happen, I said. People just started talking to me, and I tried to help. That's exactly my point. You're not trying to be something you're not. You're just being yourself, and people are drawn to that authenticity. Dave paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. I have a proposition for you. Dave explained that he'd been contacted by several other coffee shop owners around Portland who had heard about what we'd created at Common Ground. They wanted to know if our model could be replicated, not just the business aspects, but the community-building culture. I think there's an opportunity here to consult with other businesses about creating more connected, caring environments, Dave said. You could help train their staff, design their spaces, develop programs that bring communities together. It would be part-time at first, but it could grow into something bigger. The idea intrigued me, but it also felt overwhelming. Dave, I don't have any formal training in consulting or community development. Jake, you can't learn what you do in a classroom. You have an intuitive understanding of how to make people feel valued and connected. That's worth more than any degree. That night, I sat in my apartment with great-grandfather's journal, thinking about Dave's offer. I'd filled the entire journal with entries about moments of connection and impact. The pattern was undeniable. I had a gift for bringing out the best in people and creating environments where they felt safe to be themselves. I thought about Grandma's letter, about her advice to trust the path that opened up before me. This consulting opportunity felt like the next step on that path, but I wasn't sure I was ready to take it. The answer came from an unexpected source. Margaret, the elderly woman who had been our customer on opening day, had become a daily regular. She usually sat in the same spot by the window, reading and observing the bustle of the coffee shop with obvious enjoyment. One morning, she approached me with a serious expression. Jake, dear, may I speak with you privately for a moment? We sat down at a quiet table in the back corner. Jake, I've been watching what you've created here, and I think you should know what it's meant to this neighborhood. Margaret explained that she'd moved to Portland 6 months ago to be closer to her daughter after her husband died. She'd been struggling with loneliness and depression, feeling like she didn't belong anywhere. This coffee shop has become my lifeline, she said, not just because of the excellent coffee, but because of the sense of community you've fostered. I've made friends here. I feel useful again. I help tutor some of the children who come in after school. For the first time since Harold died, I wake up looking forward to my day. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wrote something for you. It's not much, but I wanted you to know what you've accomplished. The paper contained a handwritten letter. Dear Jake, 6 months ago, I was a lonely widow who felt invisible to the world. Today, I am part of a community that values my presence and my contributions. You didn't just create a coffee shop. You created a place where people matter. I've watched you help James find his confidence and land a job. I've seen you encourage Maria to pursue her dream of becoming a teacher. I've observed you listen patiently to Robert's stories about his grandchildren, making an old man feel heard and appreciated. You have a gift, young man. You see potential in people that they can't see in themselves, and you create spaces where that potential can flourish. Please don't keep this gift confined to one coffee shop in one neighborhood. The world needs more places like this and more people like you. With admiration and gratitude, Margaret Thompson. As I read Margaret's letter, I felt something click into place. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the ripple effect of creating spaces where people felt valued and connected. That evening, I called Dave and accepted his consulting offer. Within a month, I was working with 3 different businesses around Portland, helping them think about how to build stronger connections with their communities. The work was challenging but deeply fulfilling. I helped a struggling bookstore in Southeast Portland create a community reading program that brought together people of all ages. I worked with a family restaurant in Beaverton to design a space and culture that made solo diners feel welcome and included. I consulted with a small gym about creating fitness programs that focused on support and encouragement rather than competition and judgment. Each project taught me something new about the principles Grandma had been trying to show me all along. That people desperately want to feel seen and valued, that small acts of kindness have enormous impact, and that creating authentic community is one of the most important things we can do in an increasingly disconnected world. But the project that changed everything was one I never saw coming. In November, almost exactly a year after I'd found Grandma's letter, I received a call from Linda Chen, Marcus's mother, who had visited me at the coffee shop months earlier. Jake, I hope you don't mind me calling, but Marcus has been telling his colleagues at Stanford about you, and one of them has an interesting proposition. Linda explained that Dr. Sarah Martinez, a professor in Stanford's psychology department, was researching the impact of community spaces on mental health and social connection. She'd heard about Common Ground Coffee through Marcus and was interested in studying what we'd created. She wants to interview you about your approach, Linda said. And if the research supports what she suspects, she's hoping to partner with you on developing a program that could be implemented in communities across the country. 3 weeks later, I found myself on Stanford University's campus, sitting in Dr. Martinez's office overlooking the beautiful California hills. Dr. Martinez was a warm woman in her 50s with an easy laugh and an obvious passion for her work. Jake, I've been studying community psychology for 20 years, and what you've created in Portland is remarkable, she said. Most community building efforts are top-down, designed by experts and implemented by institutions. But you've created something organic and authentic that actually works. Dr. Martinez explained her research on the mental health crisis, particularly among young adults who felt disconnected and purposeless despite being more digitally connected than any generation in history. What people need, she said, are what we call third places, spaces that aren't home or work, where they can form meaningful connections with others. But most businesses focus on efficiency and profit rather than community building. You figured out how to do both. Over the next several hours, Dr. Martinez interviewed me about my approach, my philosophy, and the specific strategies I'd developed. She was particularly interested in what she called my strength-based community building, the way I helped people recognize and share their own gifts rather than just receiving services. Jake, I think you've intuitively developed an approach that could be transformative if we can scale it properly, she said. Would you be interested in partnering with us to create a training program for other community builders? The opportunity was bigger than anything I'd ever imagined. Dr. Martinez envisioned a certification program where I would teach others how to create authentic community spaces, combined with research that would demonstrate the mental health benefits of this approach. We could start with a pilot program in 10 communities across the country, she explained. Coffee shops, bookstores, community centers, libraries, any space where people gather. We'd train local leaders using your methods, then study the outcomes. I thought about Grandma's letter, about her belief that I had something important to offer the world. I thought about great-grandfather's journal, now completely filled with stories of connection and impact. I thought about Margaret's transformation from isolation to community engagement, about James finding his confidence, about all the small moments that had added up to something meaningful. Dr. Martinez, I said, I think my grandmother would love this idea. 6 months later, the Connected Communities Project launched with pilot programs in 10 cities across the United States. I spent my time traveling between these communities, training local leaders in what we'd come to call authentic hospitality, the art of creating spaces where people felt genuinely seen and valued. The results exceeded even Dr. Martinez's optimistic projections. Communities that implemented our approach saw measurable improvements in residents' reported levels of loneliness, depression, and social anxiety. Local businesses participating in the program saw increased customer loyalty and community engagement. Most importantly, people in these communities reported feeling more hopeful about their neighborhoods and their own place within them. 1 year after the program launched, I was invited to speak at a national conference on community mental health. As I stood on the stage looking out at an audience of psychologists, social workers, business owners, and community leaders, I thought about the journey that had brought me there. I began my presentation with a story about my grandmother Rose, about a letter that taught me to recognize my own worth, and about the power of small acts of kindness to create ripple effects we never see coming. A year and a half ago, I told the audience, I was a 22-year-old coffee shop employee who was convinced he didn't matter. I had no idea that the simple act of listening to customers, of making them feel welcome and valued, was actually a skill set that could change communities. I talked about the importance of creating spaces where people feel permission to be themselves, where their contributions are recognized and celebrated, where they can find connection and purpose. The mental health crisis in our communities isn't just about individual therapy or medication, I concluded. It's about creating cultures of belonging where people feel inherently valuable just as they are. Every business, every organization, every community space has the opportunity to be part of the solution. After my presentation, dozens of people approached me with questions, ideas, and stories of their own. A librarian from Wisconsin wanted to create a program for isolated seniors. A restaurant owner from Texas was interested in building community around shared meals. A gym owner from Colorado wanted to design fitness programs that focused on support rather than competition. That night, in my hotel room, I made my final entry in Great-Grandfather's Journal. March 15th, spoke to 500 people today about the power of community and connection. Grandma was right. I did have something important to offer the world. But the most beautiful part is realizing that everyone in that audience has the same potential to make a difference in their own communities. The gift isn't unique to me. It's the universal human capacity for kindness and connection. We just need to remember how to use it. As I closed the journal, I smiled, thinking about how proud Grandma Rose would be. She'd seen something in me that I couldn't see in myself, and she'd had the wisdom to know that the message would be most powerful, coming after I'd experienced my own doubts and struggles. The boy who had once believed he didn't matter had become a man who helped others discover their own significance, and it had all started with a letter from someone who loved me enough to collect evidence of my worth until I was ready to see it for myself. The Connected Communities Project continued to grow, expanding to 50 cities within 2 years. But the real measure of success wasn't in the numbers or the recognition. It was in the thousands of small moments happening every day in coffee shops and bookstores and community centers across the country, where people were discovering that they mattered, that they belonged, and that their presence made a difference in someone else's life, just like Grandma Rose had always known it would.